Well, good morning. Now, in yesterday's class, we were talking about the motivation and three competencies based on motivation we had completed yesterday. The achievement, drive, commitment, and initiative. Fourth, I wanted to complete yesterday, but I could not complete because I had to end the class a little earlier because of some discomfort that I was feeling. So now we will complete the fourth competence based on motivation, and then we will start with the empathy part. So fourth one, write down optimism. Fourth competence based on motivation is optimism. Now, before we talk about optimism in some detail, it's a very important competence as we will see. Let us briefly talk about one thing, that when we talk about optimism, then we often differentiate optimism from another important thing, related concept called hope. So, can you think of what is the basic difference between optimism and hope? I hope some of you may have thought about it. It's a very common thing again. If you look at before difference, if you look at a similarity between the two, both of them are similar in one aspect, that in both of them that we have a positive expectation of a future outcome. So, some future outcome, something that is going to happen in the future, we have a positive expectation that outcome will be positive. Then we can be both optimistic also and hopeful also. That is what optimism and hope can be similar in a way. But there is a very subtle difference between the two. What is the difference? Difference is that optimism, first important difference is that optimism is very specific. Hope can be very general also. I will give you some example of that. Optimism often involves some problem. So optimism comes into play mainly when we feel some problem, we face some problems in our life, some problems, some difficulties, etc. Hope may be without any problem also. We generally may hope that okay, things are going to be good. Optimism on the other hand is an active process. Active process, hope can be passive also. So we can passively quietly sit quietly, close your eyes and hope that things will turn out well. That is hope. That may be hope. That optimism does not mean that. Optimism cannot be like that. Optimism cannot be passive. You have to do something, activity. And what is that activity? Well, that is some effort. So optimism always involves some effort on the part of the person. Hope may not involve some effort. So finally, we can say optimism is a situation when we face a certain specific problem, and we feel that by our active effort we can solve the problem, we can change the outcome, then we are optimistic. Hope may not involve any of them. So for example, a few years ago, suppose that India was playing the World Cup semi-final cricket. New Zealand, I think. India was in a very bad condition. So throughout the tournament, India's performance was stellar, very good, but in that semi-final, it was playing very badly. Now, suppose you are watching that game sitting at your home. If you are watching that game sitting at your home, then you can see, then you may, then if you think that, well, India might still win the game, then you are only hopeful. So you can only say that I hope that India can still win the game. You cannot say that I am optimistic that India win the game. Sitting at your home, watching that match on the television, if you say that I am optimistic that India win the game, then you are using the wrong word from our point of view. So we can only hope, because sitting at your home, you cannot do anything in order to change the outcome. Only thing that you can do is to pray to the God, which we are not very sure how much it works. So that is, you can see the thing. But Indian players on the ground, they can be optimistic also. So they can say that yes, we are still optimistic that we win the game. They were, you can say, because they can do something to change in order to change the outcome. We sitting at your home cannot do anything to change the outcome. So we can only hope, but they can be optimistic also. So optimism often requires some effort on the part of the person who has that positive expectation. In a way, we can see that hope is a larger category in that sense. Optimism is a subset of that. This can be hope and this can be optimism. So we can say that optimism is a special type of hope where these conditions are well present, these conditions are somehow met. So that is how we understand hope or optimism. And since it is optimism that requires some effort on our part, so we have put optimism as a part of emotional intelligence, not the hope. That is how we can differentiate between the two. Let's talk about how do we conceptualize optimism in our model. So write down further optimism. Write down further. Again, a simple definition of that. Optimism is our ability to persist, show persistence. It's our ability to show persistence. Optimism is our ability to show persistence and to show persistence and to handle setbacks and obstacles. Optimism is our ability to show persistence and to handle setbacks and obstacles. So, that is how we exactly define optimism. Show persistence. Remember, that requires activity. So, idea is that setback, obstacles, or you can see failure, maybe difficulties, whatever you can see. So, idea is that whenever we fail in something, then first thing that is compromised in us is our motivation. We get demotivated, and because of that demotivation we stop working. Now optimism in that situation in which despite repeated failures maybe our effort is not reduced. We keep on doing the work that we were doing in spite of the fact that we do not get the desired result, in spite of the fact that we do not, you can say, succeed in that case. Persistence is the key word here. Persistence, or you can call perseverance. We can call also that similar to fortitude, etc. These are the important, you can say, words again. As I told you earlier, that optimism appears to be a very important competence for civil service in general, UPSC exam, because a few questions have been asked in UPSC exam in the previous, you can say, many years, where optimism was a question. There was a question a few years ago that write a short note on perseverance. Now in that case they did not use the term optimism, but you have to realize that the word perseverance is same as the optimism. So in that case most of the thing that we are going to talk about in this topic you can somehow write in your own language, shorten that depending on how long you have to write. There was another question that what is the role of trustworthiness and fortitude in civil service. Trustworthiness we had seen in our previous class, and fortitude we will see in today's class. So at least 2-3 questions that directly have been asked from this topic, and there are a number of indirect questions from this topic, because this topic does appear to be very important for civil service. We will see that also towards the end of the topic. So can say optimism is our ability to show persistent perseverance, fortitude in spite of the fact that you face some setback, obstacles, or you fail in something. Because if you look at any successful person in the world, then before that person became successful, that person has his own quota of failure. How did you handle your failure will possibly determine how successful you are. So after a failure, some people become demotivated, they stop working. And there are some people, in spite of the failures, repeated maybe, well, they keep on working and ultimately they succeed. Perhaps the best example of that perseverance that I remember, I hope many of you may be aware of that, was the case of Thomas Alva Edison. Edison, I hope all of you know his story, the person who invented that tungsten wala electric bulb. It is said that before he was successful in making that bulb. Well, he failed more than 1000 times before he was successful in making the bulb. Think of it. We fail once or twice and we become demotivated, we stop working. And here is a person, he did not fail once or twice. He did not fail 100 or 200 times. He failed more than 1000 times, and still he kept on showing that persistence, and ultimately he was successful in making the bulb. He failed so many times, and there are many stories about his failure and his persistence. I hope you are aware of some of these stories. There is a story about him that after maybe 8, so he have failed so many times that people around him had started sort of making fun of him, ridiculing him, that, well, he is a mad scientist, he is trying to do something which is impossible, he is just wasting his time and money on doing something that can never happen. 1000 times you fail and still you are doing. So many people started making fun of him, mad scientist, something like this. Now there is a story that after some time, you can say after 800, 900 failures maybe, his story became popular about the failed scientist maybe. Well, there is a story that once he was coming out of his lab and he was smiling. Somebody asked him the question that, you are smiling, what happened? Did you succeed in your experiment? To which he replied that, no, I did not succeed even today. Then the friend asked him, if you do not succeed today, it means you failed. If you fail, then why are you smiling? What is there to smile about it? To which he said that, well, I think that from my quota of failure, one more failure has been taken out, and I am one step closer to success now. Thinking about that success, which is one step closer to me, well, I am smiling. Now, that is the height of optimism. That even in failure, he was thinking that he was closer to success now. So that is what, so his mind was not on the failure, his mind was on success that he thought was one step now closer to him. One more, well, failure has gone. So that was an optimistic attitude of the person. Even at the failure, they, well, see like this one, they think like this one. There is another story about him that he said, there is a quotation of him, he said that I did not fail 1000 times. I have learned 1000 ways of not making a bulb. Then after, I learned the right way of making a bulb. Now, if you think like this one, then human beings can never fail. So either you learn or you succeed. Failure can be a learning. So he said that I learned how not to make a bulb 1000 times, and then I learned how to make a bulb. Both of them are learning. Where is failure then? So in this attitude, if you have, this is the optimistic attitude that a person can never fail. Then there is a beautiful quotation of Friedrich Nietzsche, one of my favorite philosopher. He had said that, there is a quotation of him, a famous quotation on social media these days also. He said that anything that does not kill me makes me stronger. Now that's a very interesting way to say. Anything that does not kill me makes me stronger. So anything that happens to me in my life, either it will kill me, and if I die, I am gone, everything is over. And if it does not kill me, it will make me stronger. I will come out stronger out of this. So this is the highest form of, against optimism. In this sense, again, you can say human beings can never fail. In our life, there is only one failure is. And what is that failure? That we die. Death is the only failure that we cannot avoid. Everybody has to die someday or the other. Except for that, everything in the life can be counted as a success. So that is what optimistic attitude essentially is. If you are alive today, you are successful. If somebody is not alive, somebody is dead, that person is gone. So either you die or you succeed. That is what he says. So in that attitude, human beings can never fail in anything. So that is what is the optimistic attitude in that case. So many such examples are there in the history where some people, because of their repeated doggedness, you can say, dogged perseverance, well, they have been able to achieve something significant in their life. Another example that is often cited about this, I hope many of you may be aware of that example also, was the case of Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln, it is said about him that he lost virtually every election in USA, and finally he kept on persisting, and finally he became the president of America, one of the most loved president of America, the person who ended the Civil War, the person who ended the slavery, the person who brought about Emancipation Proclamation, and the person who was finally assassinated also. but one of the most important president in the history of the United States. But before he became the president, he failed a number of times. That is what you can say. So that failure, how do you handle your failure, is a very important part of a successful life. We all go through the bad phase of our life. So how do you handle yourself when you are going through the bad phase of your life will determine how successful you will be. So how do you handle the low phase of your life will determine how high you will go in your life. Many people are there who have been able to handle their low phase of life very dignified manner, and that ultimately made them to be extremely successful in their life. That is what optimism means. So that is the idea. The most important defining characteristics of optimism is this. Now, second one, write down further. They are motivated by a hope of success rather than the hope of success rather than the fear of failure. They are motivated by the hope of success rather than the fear of failure. So, this we have already talked about in yesterday's class with reference to the achievement drive. So, as we have seen earlier also, that optimism is a part of hope. So, hope is something that is their motivation. Fear is not their demotivation. They are not afraid of the failure. Failure is a part of life. Anybody who achieves in his life, 50% chance is that that person may fail also. That we have seen in yesterday's class. So, everybody fails sometimes or other. The failure does not demotivate them. Failure does not create low in them. Hope of success is something that think of that. What is that statement of Thomas Edison that I talked about earlier? That he said, for example, that even in this failure, so I failed today, but I think that one failure is gone. I'm closer to success. Even in failure, he was thinking about the success. That success is one step closer to me now. That is what again is an optimistic attitude, hope of success. Hope of success motivates them. And that ultimately allows them to keep on working harder and harder. So that is the second important characteristics of optimism, which in some detail we had already talked about in yesterday's class. Now, change the paragraph and then after write some general thing. According to Martin Seligman, optimistic people differ from the pessimists. Optimistic people differ from the pessimists in how do they explain their failure. Optimistic people differ from the pessimists in how do they explain their failure. On the basis of, write down further, on the basis of our life experiences, we develop a habitual way of explaining our failure. We develop a habitual way of explaining our failure called explanatory style. On the basis of our life experiences, we develop a habitual way of explaining our failure called explanatory style. So, That is the next important thing. Now, before we talk about explanatory style, let's briefly talk about Martin Seligman. Now, Martin Seligman is a very important psychologist or researcher in this area that we are talking about today. In around 1998, 25 years ago, he became the president of APA, American Psychological Association, the most important association of psychologists in the world. So he became the president of APA, and then after on that year, he virtually changed the way the psychological research, health research in the health science is often done. What he did, first of all, he claimed that the way we define health today, think of it, he claimed the way we define health today, he called that as this is a negative health, negative definition of health. He called that as negative health. What is the meaning of the term negative health? Negative health means that today we often define health in terms of the absence of disease, not in terms of presence of something. Suppose, for example, you go to a doctor and ask the doctor, am I healthy or not? What the doctor does? Well, doctor will give you all tests on you, blood test, urine test, ultrasound, ECG, etc., etc. And suppose all the test gives you normal result, blood test, etc. Sorry, you can say the sugar test, etc., etc. So if suppose all the results give you the normal result, all the test, then doctor will say you are healthy. Now, in this case, doctor is not checking your health. What is it that the doctor is checking? He is checking your disease. So we don't check the health. We don't understand the health. We understand only the disease. That is where he said the problem. So this is what he called the negative definition of health. Negative health. Negative does not mean morally bad. Negative simply means absence. So he said that today we define health in terms of the absence of disease. We don't understand health. We understand only the disease. So that is why you can say, he said that now this is the old definition, this is negative definition. And he said that now the time has come when we have to change this negative definition of health. And he said that now the time, our knowledge has reached a level where we are today in a position to talk about what he calls the positive health. So he said that today now onwards, we should define health in terms of, not in terms of absence of disease, but let us define health in terms of presence of something in one's life. That is something that will be a positive health. And then after, he had started a sort of movement in the health science after that. We often call that as positive health movement or positive psychology movement. It has become, for the last 25 years, it has been sort of movement in the health science, that how can we make a positive health? How can we understand a positive health? And he himself, and along with his, you can say, the colleagues and all, for the last 25 years, they have done lots and lots of research to understand what is it that we can classify as positive health. So he has done lots of research in that area. Lots of research in that area here. He had written many books on these topics, like, for example, books like Learned Optimism or Optimistic Child or Authentic Happiness, etc., etc. More recently, he has written another interesting book or influential book called Flourish. So he himself has written many books on this topic since the last 25 years, general book also, not only psychological research paper, etc. So he has done lots of what is it that makes the positive health. He has done lots of research, he and his colleagues and all, these people who are a member of the positive psychology movement, they have done lots of research in this area to understand what is positive health, what is the quality of life, what is the well-being. So these are the topics on which they have done lots of research. In his recent book, that last book that he has written called Flourish, he has talked about one interesting thing that I would like to talk about here. He says that what is that positive health? What is the meaning of a good life? He said a good life must be decided or defined in terms of 5 important things. So more of these 5 things are there in your life, well, better your life is. What are these 5 things? He expressed these 5 things in the form of an acronym called PERMA. Called PERMA. We can make it Prema, R-N-E, replace that, you can become Prema, a Hindi word also. But let me stick to his original acronym, PERMA. What is PERMA? These 5 things define the good health according to him, good life according to him. So, and positive health he focused so much because also he found rather that in many of research that there are many people, who otherwise have, I can say, no disease in them, medically speaking, but still their life is a miserable life. And there are many people who may have many disease in them maybe, but still their life is a good life. They claim that they have a good life. So, a subjective quality of life is not determined by whether you have disease or not. It is determined by whether you have something positive in your life or not. And he claimed that these are the 5 important things that may make the positive health, positively psychologically life. What are these 5 things? PERMA. Let's briefly talk about them. PERMA, P means positive emotions. Positive emotions. He said that how much time during the day you spend with the positive emotions and how much time during the day you spend with the negative emotions. That is the thing, because we all have everyday positive emotions also, like happiness, excitement, thrill, challenge, calmness, peace, composure, love, pride. So these are the positive, gratitude. So these are the positive emotions that we have. And how much time during the day you spend with the negative emotions, like for example anger, fear, disgust, contempt, hatred, sadness, etc., etc. They are the negative emotions of life. So how much time of the day you spend with the positive emotions, that right side of that circle, and well, how much time during the day you spend with the negative emotions, left side of that circle, that emotion circle that we had talked about. So he found, and his researchers have found, that if the total, suppose think of it, he found that if the ratio of the positive versus negative, suppose positive emotions are these and negative emotions are these, if the ratio of the two is found to be 3:1, then that person can claim to lead a good life. 3:1 was his estimate. Idea is that every 1 hour that you spend with the negative emotion, you should have at least 3 hours that you spend with the positive emotions. If that ratio is being maintained normally in your life, then perhaps your quality of life is better. But if it is less than that, well, it may change on the person to person. I'm not taking too much emphasis on this data, this ratio. But the idea is that positive emotions must be larger and negative emotions must be smaller in terms of the time of the day that they influence us. So that is what he said, because negative emotions, if you look at it, negative emotions itself becomes a problem for us, punishment for us. There is a famous quotation of Buddha. Buddha has said that you will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. Now that's an interesting thing to say. Almost every religion says that if you become angry, then God will punish you for that. Buddha said that no, God is not going to punish. Buddha did not believe in God that much. So he said that no, God is not going to punish you for that. So you will not be punished for your anger, you will be punished by your anger. Your anger will be a punishment to you first. So if you are angry, for example, forget about the person who may suffer because of your anger. You are the first person to suffer from that. You will be punished not for your anger, but by your anger. This is what Buddha said. There is another interesting, from this point of view, there is another interesting quotation of Mark Twain, one of my favorite author. He had said that there is no hell. Sinners also go to heaven, but they hate it. Now, that's another interesting way to say again. Suppose he said that there is no hell. Everybody go to heaven only, but sinners hate that heaven. So, heaven and hell is what? It's not something in the sky where you go after you die. Heaven and hell is all in our mind. So, when we have positive emotions, for example, then you are in heaven. And when you hate something or you are in negative emotions, then your mind becomes hell. Heaven and hell is just a mind that we have again. It can be heaven also if positive emotions are there. It can be hell also if negative emotions are there. So this is what he found about that. P means that. E means, E he called that engagement. which we in our class have studied as flow. So engagement basically means that there should, which we have discussed in yesterday's class as flow. So this means something like this, that 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 he claimed that there should be something in our life doing which we should experience the flow. You must be so engaged in that work that we virtually lose the track of space and time. So this is what you can see he claimed to have in that case. So flow engagement, where you lose the track. Remember, one important characteristics of flow was that we lose even the track of space and time. So he said that there should be something in our life while doing which we might even lose the track of space and time as well. That is what he calls the flow experience. Second important thing. So there should be something like that in our life as well. Third thing is R. R means relationship. R means relationship. Relationship essentially means that there should be some relationship in our life, very close, profound and deep relationship that can be, well, so that person can be an important part of your life. There must be at least a few relationships. He has said, I think I might have mentioned that in my some other class earlier also, introduction classes, that he was the person who said that if there is somebody in your life whom you can make a call even at 2 o'clock in the night, if you feel disturbed, then you are going to live longer than those people who do not have any such person in his life. So such relationship, we can say, whom you can take for granted, and that person will not mind being taken for granted by you. Then that means that you have a good relationship. That will increase even not only quality of your life, it will actually increase the longevity of your life as well. You will live longer if such relationships are there in your life. This is what he found. M means meaning, which we have discussed in our class as commitment. Which we have discussed in our class as commitment. So as I told you yesterday, that sense of commitment is something that gives us a sense of meaning and purpose. So there must be something in our life for which we should have a strong sense of commitment. Maybe workplace, maybe a relationship, maybe a social cause, but anything for which we must have a strong sense of commitment. The stronger is the sense of commitment, well, better your life is. So that is the M. And last A, he called that accomplishment, but I would like to call that as achievement, which we have discussed in our class as achievement drive. So there should be something in our life, some achievement in our life of which we can be proud of. That yes, this is what my achievement is, this is what my great work is. So that is something that should be there in your life. That is what makes the quality of life good. So he said that there are 5 important things that makes a good quality. The more of these things are there in your life, better your life is. And less of that is there in our life, well, worse that person's life would be. So that is how. So idea here is that can say Martin Seligman was the person who has done lots and lots of research in this area, and he has foundational research, one of the most important research in this area that we are talking about. That is what Martin Seligman was. Now come back to that idea that we were talking about. He said, for example, that on the basis of our life experiences, we develop, we learn a habitual way of explaining our failure. When we fail in something, then we habitually explain our failure. What is the meaning of this failure for me? Habitually we explain that. And this habitual way of explaining is what he calls the explanatory style. So we can say that there can be 2 types of explanatory style: optimistic style and the pessimistic style. So optimistic people have a different style of explaining their failure, and pessimistic people have a very different style of explaining their failure. So let's talk about what that style actually involves. But before that, let me see, I think there is a question. Subhashri. Sir, in our real day-to-day life, hope sometimes extended and it enters into the area of faith and belief in God, that someday someone will hear our prayers and give us the desired result. This line is blurred where hope and optimism turns into religious belief. Does ethics makes us aware about this, or it is just me who is over explaining? No, Subhashri, it may happen that hope may become, we can say, the hope may be based on some belief in the God or something like that. God will help me maybe. But that hope is a hope. It will not be optimism. Because optimism means that you have to do something in order to change the outcome. As I told you earlier, we'll see that in both the cases here more detail. So optimism requires your effort. Hope may include, okay, God will help me maybe. So let me sit quietly, God will do everything. So hope may involve, may be based on faith also, faith of God. So it's not over explaining, it is slightly extending about this idea. So that is one thing. Now write down further, change the paragraph and then after write further. This style involve three dimensions. This style involves three dimensions. So when we define this style, then we often talk about three basic dimensions. So these dimensions can help us to differentiate between the people who are optimistic and people who are pessimistic. What are these three dimensions? Let's briefly talk about that. First one is permanence. Write down a few lines. Optimistic people often explain their failure. Optimistic people often explain their failure as more permanent. Optimistic people often explain their failure as temporary. Optimistic people often explain their failure as temporary, while pessimists often consider them as more permanent. While the pessimists often consider them as more permanent. So this is the first important dimension of optimism. The idea here is that how permanent you think that the effect of, you can see, the failure is on your life. Suppose, let's take a small example. Suppose there is a student who could not prepare for the UPSC exam, who could not clear the prelims this time. And suppose, you can say, so it is a failure. So how do you explain that failure? There are two ways of explaining their failure. Some people will say, some students will think that, well, even after so much of effort, even after so much of work, well, I could not clear the prelims. It means perhaps I will never be able to do that. If you think like this, then you are showing high permanence. High permanence is a sign of pessimistic style. Pessimistic people often, whenever they find themselves in some fails in something, then they often use the term always or never. They often use the term always or never to explain their failure. That I failed in any small thing also. I failed in this exam, it means that I could not clear this exam, I will never be able to clear this exam. Or when something wrong happens to them, like even such a simple thing. Suppose you miss your train. I always miss my train. You are late in a classroom. I am always late in the classroom. So something wrong happens, we use the term always. It will always happens to me. And when something right does not happen, perhaps it will never happen to me. So they use always and never to explain their failure, to think about their failure. How many of you are an example of this? In every class, many students say, sir, I am like that maybe. One of my students was there once, when there was a girl in one of my class. She came after the classroom to me and she told me, sir, this whole class appeared to be just for me. That it appears that you are explaining my behavior rather than you are talking about a theory here. So there are many people who think like that. It always है, मेरे साथ हमेशा ऐसा ही होता है. It always happens to me, or it never happens to me. So if you use these terms, then you can be a little clear. You have to, you should try to change your thinking pattern. On the other hand, suppose there is another student who also failed in this exam, prelims. He will think that, so what, I failed in this exam. Next year I will work harder, and next year I will clear the exam. Nobody will stop me. If you think like this, then you are showing low permanence. Low permanence is a sign of optimistic style. Optimistic people often think in terms of, well, this time rather than always, or you can say sometimes rather than never, in order to explain while explaining their failure. So this time I was not able to clear the prelims, or sometimes I missed my train, or sometimes I am late in the classroom. So they often use the limiting word to explain their failure. They, on the other hand, they explain more pervasive word, more bigger word to explain their failure in that sense. So this is what we can say. So if you think like this one, always and never, the moment this word always and never comes into your mind, well, change that to sometimes or this time. Suddenly you will see that your mind will change, and your whole outlook towards the world or your success and failure will possibly change. So that is what we can see. Permanence is first important dimension of optimism. Then there is second dimension also. This is called pervasiveness. Pervasiveness. Write on further. Optimistic people often consider their failure as limited to optimistic people often consider their failure as limited to that very domain in which it has occurred. In that very domain in which it has occurred. While the pessimist ones, while the pessimists extend them to, while the pessimists extend them to the whole of their life. While the pessimists extend them to the whole of their life. So this is the second way of, this is the second dimension of our explanation. Think of it again. Suppose there is a student, let's take a small example. Suppose there is a student preparing for the UPSC exam, and well, this person prepared for 5-6 years, and after lots of effort also, well, he could not declare exam in the last attempt also. Now one big, you can say, so the last attempt is over, now he cannot, can say, write this exam again. Now it is a big failure, a big setback, because 5, 6 or 7 years of his life he has wasted on that, spent on that, and well, one path is now closed. So that's a big setback, a big failure. Now after that, how do people explain? There are two ways of explaining the failure. Some people think, for example, that suppose, for example, some students, suppose, for example, this is your life. Some students think that, well, I failed in the one part of my life, civil servant. I could not become civil servant. This path is now closed. So I failed into that. But that does not mean that I am a complete failure. If I lost UPSC exam, for example, it's not my loss maybe, it is the government of India's loss perhaps. They did not deserve a bright student like me maybe. Or, well, I could not clear this exam, but I will do something better in life. Life is much bigger than the UPSC. Nothing is the end of the life. So I will do something bigger, I will do something larger, I will do something more important, more successful. So if you think like this, then you are showing a low pervasiveness. Low pervasiveness is a sign of optimistic style. Optimistic people often think in terms of this thing in which they fail, or whatever you can say. I will see shortly. On the other hand, there are some students who might possibly say that I could not clear the UPSC exam after even so much of time, money, effort, etc. being spent in that. It means I am a complete failure in my life. So they fail in one thing and they extend that to the whole of their life. So they failed in one thing and they think that their life is a failure. They start coloring the whole life in just one color. That I failed in this exam, so I am a complete failure in my life. Life is always, this is a very problematic type of thinking, illogical type of thinking. You failed in one thing and you think everything is a failure. No, life is much bigger than that. So first group of people will say, I failed in UPSC, otherwise I am a very successful person. I have good relationship, I had a great academic career. UPSC is the only one thing in which I failed. So in academics I have succeeded, in relationship I am a good person, in so many other things I have succeeded in, I have done wonders in my life. But this person will take one thing, one example of a failure, and he will color whole of his life in that example itself, that color itself. If this person shows that, then this is a sign of high pervasiveness. High pervasiveness is a sign of pessimistic style. Pessimistic people often think in terms of I or any such global term, that I am a complete failure, or if somebody behaves badly with them, he is a bad person. One behavior bad and he becomes a bad person. He on the other hand, they on the other hand, they think that, oh, he is perhaps in a bad mood today. Now, mood is a bad thing rather than the whole person. Nobody is 100% bad. Everybody has something good or something bad. But you take one example of bad and you color the whole person in that same example. That is a high pervasiveness. Your small observation pervades your complete judgment about the person, either about yourself or about the other person. That will be a high pessimistic style. Pervasiveness. So these are the two basic dimensions. If you look at permanence, permanence is more about time and pervasiveness is more about space. Pervasiveness is more about the space. So you can say these two dimensions are about the time, space, life space, I mean. So permanence and pervasiveness are more about life space and the time. So in both of them, optimistic people, both in time and space, they often limit their failure. And pessimistic people, both in time and space, well, they extend their failure, they make their failure bigger than what it appears to, both in time also and space also. So that is what is basic difference between the optimistic style and the pessimistic one. But there is a third dimension also. Let's talk about the third one. Let's write down further third one. Personalization. Write down further. Optimistic people often consider their failure as due to some external changing or controllable factors. External changing or controllable factors, while the pessimists consider them as due to some permanent internal flaw, FLAW, weakness. While the pessimists consider them as due to some permanent internal flaw. Now, third dimension is another thing that sometimes, as we will see shortly, may make optimism a little problematic also. So, what is that? Because after we can say explaining in the first two dimensions, we start thinking What made me to fail? What was the reason for my failure? What is it to which I can attribute my failure? Now, think of it again, same thing, somebody could not clear the exam. Now, there are two ways of explaining that failure. Some people think that, well, I failed because perhaps the questions were very difficult. This year, the question was actually very difficult in the CSAT, So, questions were very difficult. Or I failed because perhaps the questions were out of syllabus maybe. Or sir did not teach well. Or coaching did not complete syllabus on time. Or father did not send me the money on time. So, if these are the factors, or perhaps I did not work that hard. If these are the factors, then we can see that that will be a sign of low personalization. Low personalization, and low personalization, as we will see, is a sign of optimistic style, because all these factors are either external, questions are external, teacher is external, coaching is external, parents are external. So these either external and changing, all of these things can change. If the questions were difficult this time, next time questions might become easier, let me work hard. Or if the sir did not teach well, next time some other teacher will teach well, and I can still I should work hard. If father did not send me the money this time, next time perhaps I can arrange some money somehow. Well, that will be changed. So all of these factors are changing, external or controllable. So my effort, I perhaps did not work that hard. Now that is something that you can control. So if you believe that your failure is because of any of these three set of factors, external factor, well, which will be, you can say, which may not be there tomorrow, changing factor that will keep on changing on time, and controllable factors on which you can control, then you are showing low personalization. And low personalization is a sign of optimistic style. On the other hand, there are some students who say that I failed perhaps because perhaps I am not intelligent enough, I am not capable enough, I am not bright enough, I am not lucky enough. So if these are the cause of your failure, then you are showing a high permanence. High permanence is a sign of pessimistic style. So pessimistic people often think that their failure is because of some internal flaw, which is permanent, which will never change, like my intelligence. Well, it will not change. I will not become more intelligent tomorrow. My luck, it will not change tomorrow. It is the part of my, if you believe in the luck. So if you think that, well, your failure is because of some permanent internal flaw like intelligence, brightness, capability, or luck, etc., then you are actually, well, think you are showing a high personalization, pessimistic style. Pessimistic people often blame themselves for everything wrong. And if you blame yourself for everything wrong that happens to you, then that will ultimately create demotivation in you. That I am not perhaps enough, there is no point working hard. So that will ultimately demotivate you, you stop working. So pessimistic people often think that their failure is not because of their own internal problem, but because of some factors that will ultimately possibly change. Martin Seligman, the person who gave all this theory, well, he had given a very good example of low personalization, extremely low personalization, in his book Learned Optimism. He has talked about, he has written in that book that when he was a student at Harvard University, today he is a professor at Harvard University, but he was a student earlier at the same university as well. So he has written that when I was a student at the Harvard University, then you can say, then his girlfriend in the university had a very irritating habit. That whenever something wrong happened to her, she always used to blame him for that. Every time. So suppose, for example, simple thing also. Suppose someday she missed her train one day. It's because of you that I missed my train. One day she could not, her dissertation was not submitted on time. It is because of you that my dissertation was not submitted on time. One day her clothes was not properly ironed. She blamed him. It's because of you that my clothes are not ready. So every time when some wrong happened, she used to blame him for that. Now one day when she blamed him for some trivial thing, then he became very irritated. And in that irritation, he told her, the girl, that you are the most external person I have ever seen in my life. External person, meaning of that? Well, he said that whenever you have some problem, you always externalize your problem. And I am in front of you most of the time, so I am the victim of your externalization. So he told her that you are the most external person I have ever seen in my life. To which the girl replied, yes, you are right, and you are to blame for that. Now even for this, she blamed him. So that is the characteristics of the highly optimistic people. So but whenever some problem happens to them, they often find a cause of failures, I can say, somewhere else, which can change, which can be controlled, which can be external. It can become a little problematic sometimes, as you can appreciate, as you can imagine. Such people often don't think about their own self in a way. But at least this is something that keeps them confident and persevere. That is the basic thing about the optimism here. So these are the three dimensions. So finally we can say that there are two dimensions: optimistic style, all the three dimensions, permanence also is low, pervasiveness also is low, and personalization also is low. And pessimistic style, all the three dimensions, permanence also high, pervasiveness also high, and personalization also high. So all these three are high in the pessimistic style, and all the three dimensions are low in the optimistic style. Now it is also possible that a person can be high in one and low in others also. So there can be many combination of the two. How many combination can be there? Something like LHH, 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 something like this one. I hope that many of you may have already calculated. It will be 2 to the power 2 to the power 3. So 8 will be there. So overall you can say 8 intermediary style can also be there, and all of these styles, remember, it is a difference of dimension. It's not that you are optimistic 100% or pessimistic 100%. It is a dimension. That's why we often say that optimism and pessimism is more like a scale. On the extreme right, suppose it is optimistic style, and on the extreme left, suppose it is the pessimistic style. Both of these two extremes are problematic, or extremely optimistic style also is not very desirable. We will see that. So both of these two extremes are problematic. So people who are extremely pessimistic in that scale, well, these people are more likely to suffer from depression in their life. So these people, again, one thing that also you need to remember, these people have actually found a method to measure the optimistic and pessimistic style also. So we can assign you a number, how much optimistic you are or how much pessimistic somebody is. Just as in the case of IQ, we can assign a number. So we can assign a number also sort of on how much optimistic you are or how much pessimistic you are. And that will be very more or less accurate description of your style. So we have a method of measurement. I will not go into that detail in my class. That will become too, can say, descriptive here, too big for our scope. And one thing that you can remember, we can measure it, we can assign a number to the people. So people who score very low on that scale, extremely pessimistic style, these people have, so this low score on this scale and depression, between the two, a very direct correlation has been found. Lower is the scale, more is the chance of depression. So such people who are extremely pessimistic, that sometimes or the other, ठीक है, ठीक. So I think there was some audio issue. Let us go back to that. I was told that 1.5 minutes has been, I can say we have some audio issue. Now what I was talking about here, I hope that this is something that you have heard. That there are two styles can be there. One is a optimistic style. Optimistic style is the one in which all the three are low. Permanence also low, pervasiveness low, and personalization low. Pessimistic style is the one in which all the three, permanence also high, pervasiveness also high, and personalization also high. So that is what it can be. And it is also possible that a person can be low in one and high in others, low in one and high in others. So there are overall, you can say, if you look at it, there are 8 combination can be there, 2 to the power 3. So there will be 8 combinations of all the 3. So there are 8 variations of that. Not only that, between all of that 8 variation and these two, remember it is a difference of degree. They are dimension. It's not that you are 100% optimistic or pessimistic 100%. No, nobody is 100% this or that. So it is just a difference in degree that we are more optimistic or more pessimistic. So it's a question of more or less rather than yes or no. So finally we say here that optimism and pessimism is a type of scale in which the extreme right will be optimistic style where all the 3 dimension low, and extreme left will be pessimistic style where all the 3 dimension will be high. Both of these are problematic in a way. Problem is that the people who are extremely low on that scale, and as I was telling you that both of these two styles can be actually measured. We have a method of, we can assign a number to you also. Just as we can assign a number to you in terms of your intelligence, IQ, similarly, this also can be measured and an indexing can be done, a number can be assigned how much optimistic you are or how much pessimistic somebody is. So it can be measured. I will not go into that detail in my class because that will be too complicated for our course, our purpose here. But remember one thing simply, that we can measure optimism and pessimism. So we have a test for that. We can test people on the optimistic style, and we have found in our research that people who are very low on that scale, extremely pessimistic people, they are sooner or later in their life, they are more likely to suffer from depression. So there is direct correlation has been found on the pessimistic style and depression. So people who are extremely pessimistic, sometimes or the other in their life later on, they may possibly suffer from depression. So we suggest here that people who are extremely pessimistic, they themselves and their family members, etc., they should be, their family members, their, can say, relatives, their friends, etc., they should be very careful that whenever these people are going through a bad phase of their life, you know, we all go through some bad phase of our life. That sometimes we fail in an exam, sometimes we lose a job, sometimes we have some work related problem, well, bad phase of our career, sometimes we meet with an accident, sometimes you can say we suffer from very debilitating disease, somebody in the family suffers from that, there is a breakup in a relationship, there may be divorce in our family, or somebody may die in our family. We all suffer from these problems of life sometimes or the other. It is a part of life. So we believe here, we suggest here that those people who are extremely low on this scale or extremely pessimistic, well, they themselves and their family members, relatives, friends, etc., they should be very careful that when they are going through a bad phase of their life, then they should be provided some social support. Otherwise, they may fall into depression. And depression, as we have talked about in some other class also, is one of the biggest cause of unnatural death in the world. Perhaps third or fourth biggest cause after heart disease or cancer or road accident. Perhaps it is the depression that kills largest number of people unnaturally. So it is a big problem. So pessimistic style, measurement of that pessimistic style can actually help us to handle the depression as a pandemic in the modern world. So that is the idea here, that extremely pessimistic people are more likely to be depressive sometimes or the other. On the other hand, the people who are extremely high on that scale, that is also not very good. Some people who are extremely optimistic, they often become gamblers in their life and all. Think of it, optimistic people are often likely. So gamblers are extremely optimistic people. Every day they lose, but still they keep on thinking that tomorrow I will win, tomorrow I will win, tomorrow. So they often limit their failure. Okay, I failed today only, tomorrow it will be better. So they keep on staking higher and higher in their life, and sometimes they may suffer badly. Think of Mahabharata. Yudhishthir was a highly optimistic person. He lost all his, kingdom. He kept on, okay, next time I will win everything back. He put his brothers also at stake. Next time I will win everything back. He put himself also at stake. Next time I will win everything back. He put Draupadi also at stake. Next time I will win everything back. Ultimately, you know what happened there. So he was a highly optimistic person, at least at the time when he was playing the dice. So such people become gamblers, and as a gambler, sometimes they may suffer, they may, you can say, succeed also randomly, but chances of failure becomes higher for that. Just think of Thomas Alva Edison. That Edison, well, he did succeed at the end of it, but imagine after 1000 experiment, had he not succeeded, then do you not think that it might have been a huge wastage of time and money for such a great scientist? It would have been. So that might be a problem. So idea here is that optimism is good, but it is better to be realistic sometimes. Perseverance is very good, but sometimes it is better for us to stop, take a realistic call and change a course of action rather than keep on persisting on the same thing all the time. That is one problem that we may possibly think of. So as I told you earlier that there was a question a few years ago in the UPSC exam that that question, well, we will talk about shortly. So in perseverance, yes, that question, write a short note on perseverance. So you can write there the meaning of perseverance, what makes us to persevere, people. But you must also say that perseverance is very good, but sometimes very high perseverance may not be that good also. Sometimes it is important for us to take a realistic call and change our course of action rather than keep on persevering in the same thing. This is what we can see optimism means. The idea here is that instead of being blindly optimistic, we should be a little what we can call realistically optimistic. Realistically optimistic. So this is what we believe here. That is about optimism. This is how we understand that. Now one small thing further I will like you to write about that. So change the paragraph and then after write further. Optimism becomes even more important for those people Optimism becomes even more important for those people who work in such a profession where the nature of the work is very complex and who work in such a profession where the nature of the work is very complex and the condition of work is very uncertain. Or where the condition of work is very uncertain. Now, condition of work varies. Now, optimism, remember, is important for every job. So, whatever job that you are doing, optimism make, because every job when you do, sometimes or the other, we go through a bad phase of our career. So, we all go through that again, that creates a problem sometimes. But optimism becomes even more important for such a job where these two conditions are fulfilled. The, can say complex What is the meaning of the term complex? Complex basically means that when your success depends on a number of variables. If your success depends on only one variable, then that is a simple job. But if your success depends on a large number of variables, then that is a complex. In physics also, this is how you define a complex system. So, more the number of variable, more is the complexity of the system. Weather forecasting is very complex because so many variables are there. Change in any variable will make your forecast wrong. It's a very complex system. Teaching is a very simpler job, not very complex, because here only a few things determine our success. The teacher's knowledge, his delivery, and well, etc. So, complexity means how many factors are there, how many variables are there, which can determine your success and all. Uncertainty, that is simple. That means, well, there is uncertainty about a future change, then that. And the job that you people are preparing for, bureaucracy, civil service, both of these two conditions are very well met. Because of that, in case of bureaucracy, optimism becomes even more important. And even, what is the importance of these two things? First of all, importance of these two things is that both of these two things increase the chances of failure. And if there is a high chance of failure, then optimism is one thing that you cannot ignore. Optimism is one thing that you must have. That is the importance of optimism, role of optimism. So that is the idea here. So bureaucracy, you can say, is one such job where both of these two conditions are met. And even in bureaucracy, as I was telling you, the job of police is more important in that case. So if you are preparing for IPS officer, for example, if being IPS is your choice, then optimism is one of the very important thing that you need to have. Think of it. Suppose you are, why it is important for a police officer? Suppose you are an IPS officer. Suppose you are the police head of your city. And suppose a riot has broken out in your city. So a large number of people are there who are, let's say the two communities are, what is happening in Manipur, you know, or Delhi riot happened last year. So you can say a few years ago. So in that case, suppose for example, well, riot is happening here, people are killing each other badly again, burning each other's house. Whole day as a police officer, you try all your best to control the situation, but by the evening you could not control the situation. Situation is completely out of hand. Now it is a failure. Now in this situation, if you come home in the evening and if you start thinking that I could not control the situation today, it means I will never be control the situation. Well, high permanence. If you start thinking that I could not, let's say, succeed today, it means I am a complete failure as a police officer, high pervasiveness. And if you start thinking that I can say could not clear this situation today, it means that I am not competent enough. I am not, you can say, capable enough officer. If you start thinking like this, then do you think that tomorrow you will have the motivation to start working again? No, you will be highly demotivated. So in such a situation, you must think like this, that, well, so what, I could not control the situation today, tomorrow I will definitely control it. Low permanence. You must think, for example, that, well, I could not control the situation today. It does not mean I am a bad officer. I am a very good officer otherwise. I have controlled situations so many times in the past. So it is a one failure, otherwise I am a good officer. Or third, if you start thinking that I failed not because I am incompetent officer, I failed because perhaps the public mood was different, political situation or difficult, things will change tomorrow. Low personalization. So if you think like this, then tomorrow, well, you will have equal enthusiasm to work hard and, well, you can say go there and try to control the situation again. That is what optimism is. So in such a job like police, for example, bureaucracy in general, police in particular, optimism becomes even more important. That is the role of optimism in bureaucracy, in civil service, and police officers, police job. So as I told you that there was a question a few years ago that what is the role of fortitude in civil service? You can write this, define fortitude as an optimism, then after, well, discuss one example of civil service like a police officer's example. So that is how we understand optimism as an emotional competence. So that is all about optimism, and that is also all about motivation. That is also all about motivation. So these are the four motivational competences: achievement drive, commitment, initiative, and optimism. These are the four motivational competencies. They are the competencies which make us the best of what we can be. Achievement drive allows us to achieve big in our life. Commitment allows us to find meaning in that achievement. Initiative allows us to go extra to do something bigger in our life. And optimism allows us to handle the problems of our life, difficulties of our life. So these are the 4 important competencies. Motivational. So this is how we understand motivation. Third, emotional intelligence, a very important one. Now finally we will talk about the 4th emotional intelligence, that is called empathy. Empathy. Empathy, as I had told you about in the introduction class earlier, that empathy is our ability to understand others' feelings and you can say others' feelings, emotions, behaviors, perspectives, etc. So in this sense, empathy, as I told you in that class also, is the beginning of the social intelligence. So whatever we have talked about till now, the 3 emotional intelligence and the 12 emotional competences, based on them, they were all related to the self. So self-awareness or awareness of the self, regulating the self and motivating the self. So that was about the self, and empathy is about the other people. So empathy is the beginning of what we sometimes call as social intelligence as well. It is the other side of emotional intelligence. So let us see that how do we conceptualize empathy now, and how important role does empathy play in our life. What is the problem that the people sometimes face when they are low in empathy, and what is the advantage that the people have when they are high in empathy. So all of these aspects of empathy we will talk about in some detail now. So, change the paragraph and then I have to write further. Our rational mind expresses itself. Our rational mind expresses itself in terms of language, words and language. Expresses itself in terms of words and language. Expresses itself in terms of words and language, but our emotional mind expresses itself in terms of a number of non-verbal emotional cues. C-U-E-S, cues. In terms of a number of non-verbal emotional cues. So, this is how we can start our discussion of empathy. So, the idea here is that now as it has been so clear to you, all of you, that we can say that there are 2 minds that we have, rational mind and emotional mind. Well, rational mind is located in our neocortex, emotional mind is deep inside our brain into the limbic system. Rational mind is a bit slow, emotional mind is very fast. Rational mind works on the basis of logic and rationality, reason. Emotional mind works on the basis of, we can see the probability of the past event, past experience and all. So they are very different types of, can say, structure in our mind, in both structurally and functionally. They are very different from each other. 2 minds we can say that we have. Now, if you look at expression of the mind, then you see that rational mind expresses itself in terms of language. Language is a part of rationality. Highest form of rationality is the language. So rational mind expresses itself in terms of language, word, etc. But emotional mind does not express directly in the form of language. Emotional mind expresses itself in the form of what we call a large number of, for that matter, non-verbal emotional cues, CUES. What is the meaning of the cue, by the way? Well, it is a type of signal, hint, indication, etc. So emotional mind always gives us a signal about what it actually wants to express in some manner, hint, or you can say some indication about that. What are these hints, these cues? There are large number of such cues are there. For example, the most common cues are, first one is say facial expressions. Facial expressions. So as we have seen in our introduction class that every emotion has a facial expression associated with that. So whenever you feel an emotion, some change on your face always takes place. Change. So when you become happy, then you smile normally, angry, frown, sadness, perhaps cry. So every emotion, strong or weak, subtle or obvious. So the moment you feel an emotion, some change on your face always take place, some change on your lips or some muscle of your face like cheek or chin or forehead or eyebrow, nose, well, eyes, color of the face. So a number of change happens into your face whenever you feel an emotion. That is one common way. Every emotion has that. Second important thing that happens is the change in the intonation of our voice. Intonation. Every emotion changes the intonation of our voice. What is that intonation? Number of that. So for example, emotions change the pitch of our voice, which in physics frequency. Second might be loudness. In physics that will be amplitude. Then after fluency or emphasis or pauses, etc., etc. So there are a number of ways you can see that our emotional mind changes the meaning of the word also by changing these part of the speech that we are speaking. Pitch, for example, loudness, for example. Think of it that when we become happy or angry, in both the case loudness increases. But in anger, pitch is higher, in happiness, pitch is lower. So in anger, we shout and scream high pitch. In happiness, we laugh. The pitch is lower. Loud is there, but pitch is lower. So some change in the way we express our emotion in the changing our pitch or amplitude. But you can say loudness. Fluency. In some emotions, we speak faster, and in some emotion, we speak slower. So you must have, and so it changes the fluency. That's why it is often said that do not fight somebody online who can type faster than you. In anger, our fast typing speed also increases. That person will abuse you more than you can abuse him back. So that is, you can say, something that is there. So it changes our fluency, emphasis. The emotions always change the emphasis on which you are putting on while speaking in a way. Suppose, for example, think of it. Suppose, for example, your rational mind, suppose somebody does something good to you. Your rational mind decides that this person has done so good to me, so I must say thanks to this person. That is normal courtesy. That is the normal courtesy. That is normal politeness. You should say thanks to that person. But suppose, for example, your emotional mind does not agree with that. Your emotional mind thinks that, okay, this person does not deserve my thanks. So it cannot change the word, but it will simply say, okay, if you want to say thanks, they say thanks, but put more focus on thanks. So instead of thanks, say thanks, and meaning of the whole world change. Same word thanks, can be said in 100 different manner. There are genuine thanks, angry thanks, anticipatory thanks, questioning thanks, sarcastic thanks, cold thanks, warm thanks. So many different types are there. If you say thanks, for example, like stretch that word a little, you see meaning of the word will change significantly. So if you look at dictionary, for example, then meaning of this word thanks is only one. But when we speak, do we have the same meaning all the time like that in the dictionary? Of course not. So same word may have 100 meaning depending on how do we speak. Dictionary may tell you only one meaning, but we have 100 different meanings in that case. This is where the problem for possibly of communication comes up. So that is what your emotion can actually do. Emphasis, emphasize one part of the word rather than other. Pauses, where do you take a pause, comma for example in a written language, that also conveys and changes the meaning of the word. Sometimes because of the pause, well, where do you pause, the whole meaning of the word itself will be opposite, reversed. So that also changes our understanding, changes our meaning. So there are a number of ways through which you can say your emotional mind changes the meaning of the word that we are speaking. That is what intonation could possibly be. Then after, other things can be gesture, or other things can be posture. So gestures and postures are other thing. What is a gesture, for example? Well, gestures are the movement of different part of your body. Suppose for example, so suppose for example, while speaking, if I am moving my hand like this, I am showing a gesture to you. Or if you, while listening to me, if you nod your head, that you are a gesture showing me. So if I can see you. So gestures are something that is a, you can say, movement of the different part of your body, movement of hand, movement of your finger, movement of your head, one part of your body. Posture is the overall positioning of your body. How do you position your body? How do you stand? How do you sit? So suppose you are sitting in front of me in a classroom. If you are sitting parallel leg, for example, and if somebody else is sitting cross-legged, there will be different meaning of that. How do you position yourself? Suppose, for example, you are in an interview in UPSC exam and look at the interviewer like this. Well, it will have a meaning in that. So examiner will know what that does that. Or suppose you sit like this again in an interview, that again has a meaning. So that how do you see the different types of posture? That's why it is often say different type of postures are there. Formal posture, you can say friendly posture, threatening posture. So different type of postures are there. That's why it is often said that when you are going in interview, your posture must be very formal. You should not be very threatening also like this. You should not be very relaxed also, friendly also like this. You must be very formal in that case. That will because your posture will convey some meaning to the other person that may have some impact on your interview performance. So postures are very important. How do you position our body in with reference to the other person? Or it can be touch. Touch also is very important here, because how you do it? If you're angry at a person and you punch that person on his face, that also is a touch. And you pat somebody on his back, that is also a touch. Pat somebody on the head from behind, that also is a touch. If you shake hand with the other person, that also is a touch. There are different types of shake hand also, genuine shake hand, cold shake hand, warm shake hand, angry shake hand. You can say the questioning shake hand, different type of shake hands can be there. How do you shake the hand of the other person? That also conveys certain meaning. Even a small child, for example, knows the difference between the so-called good touch and the bad touch. So if somebody touches us, then intuitively we know that this touch meant good or bad. Was it offending? What is friendly? Was it sexually explicit? So that also can be the thing that we can actually understand. Touch is a very important way through which we convey emotional meaning to the other person. Or it can be eye contact. Eye contact, how do you make an eye contact with the person, also conveys some important meaning about your work and all. So there are different types of eye contacts are there, genuine eye contact, staring, ogling, or gazing. There are different types of eye contact. Sometimes not making an eye contact also conveys a meaning. So if somebody is talking to you but all the time the person is looking on the ground, then that also, well, makes you to understand something about that person. So different types of eyes are such an important part of emotional meaning, conveyance of that, expression of that, that many people say, you must have heard such things, that many people say that eyes are the window to the soul. Soul is what? Soul is the emotional mind. Soul is not something mysterious or religious here, that transmigration, etc. No, soul is just our emotional mind. Deepest part of our mind is what emotional mind is, that is soul. So eyes are window to the soul. Through the eyes we can actually go into the other person and think, feel what other person is actually feeling at that time. So there are a large number of such important ways are there through which our emotional mind makes its expression. Now write down further. Empathy depends on our ability to accurately interpret. Empathy depends on our ability to accurately interpret these emotional cues. Empathy depends on our ability to accurately interpret these emotional cues. So this is how we understand, this is how we conceptualize empathy. So how accurately you interpret these cues will determine how much empathy you have. Now if you look at, let's briefly talk a little more about these emotional cues before we proceed further. If you look at these emotional cues, then we often say that these emotional cues are sort of universal in the human species. They are universal in the human species. Every member of the species, well, human beings, well, in terms of these cues, they are more or less similar. They speak the same language in terms of emotion. They understand the same language also in the terms of emotions. So we often believe that these emotional cues are something that forms universal sort of human language. Universal human language. So we may differ from each other in terms of our rational language. But as far as emotions are concerned, then we are all same again. Universal. We differ from, we may speak different language. We may speak Hindi, Tamil, Bengali or Spanish or French. But the emotional language is the one in which everybody in the world, well, speak the same language, they understand the same language. Just think of it. We all have learned English as a second language here. Of course, all of us. But while we learn, but when we were learning English, for example, then we all have many help to us. We have the books of grammar, you can say the translation, dictionary, etc. to help her learn. But imagine the first Englishman who might have come to India. He did not know Indian languages. Indians did not know English. How did he interact with the Indians? Well, it is through these things. So these things allow us to interact with anybody in the world without learning. So anybody in the world without learning the local language of that person. It is because of these things you can go to any part of the world. You can live there comfortably without learning the local language. You will not be able to engage in the day-to-day gossip because gossip is much more rational thing. So you will not be able to engage in gossip with other people there, but at least necessities of your life you would be able to fulfill just because of these cues. They are enough for us to interact with anybody in the world. Well, so this is universal human language. Well, but some amount of cultural difference has been found. Culture does have some impact on the emotional expression as well, because some culture, for example, allow the emotional expression very openly. Indian culture, if you look at it, Indian culture is a very expressive culture. So we often encourage, or we are very open or expressive in our cultural emotional expression. When we become happy, for example, then we consider it our moral duty to let everybody know that we are happy. When we are partying at home, then we do ensure that neighbors also don't sleep. At full volume music, dance, etc. So our enjoyment is very exuberant in general. When we become sad, then we cry so badly that everybody knows that, well, something. When angry, we fight also so badly that something very, well. So every emotion, we are very, you can say, expressive in our emotion. About that expressiveness of the Indian, you can say Indians, about emotional expression, I remember one interesting story, anecdote, that almost 10 years ago, when Mercedes car were launching their one high-end car in India, I think C-Class or something, that's cost started with 1.25 crore rupees or so. So when they were launching high-end car in India, then it was a 100% imported car to India, but there was one part of that car was made in India. They got this part manufactured in India imported that to Germany, fitted that into the car, then after they exported the car to India. Can you think of what that part can be? What that part could have been? I hope some of you may have thought, because in every class, after a few, you can say, guess work, some students do arrive at the right conclusion. Well, it was horn. Horn. So, in India, that honking culture that we have is very common. That is emotional expression. We become irritated on the road and we start honking badly. Go to any road in India, we say unnecessary honking all the time. That is emotional expression. So, the Mercedes car makers thought that if they fit an can say a European horn in an Indian car, it might not last even for a month. So, they got a horn made in India, robust Indian horn, imported that to Germany, fitted that into the car, and then after they exported the car back to India. We are very expressive in our emotional expression. On the other hand, Europeans in general and French people in particular, they are very reserved in their emotional expression. So, for example, so if you meet a French person, for example, French man, for example, and if he smiles at you, then you should be happy that at least he smiled. They never laugh the way we do when all the 32 teeth are visible. So, but they are very reserved in their emotional expression. Japanese people, on the other hand, are a combination of both of that. So, Japanese people in the public setting like a classroom, like office, like airport, they are very reserved like Europeans. And in private setting, like you can say family, friend circle, etc., they are very expressive like Indians. So, the idea is that every culture teaches us that how much emotional expression is okay. But fact still is that if we express our emotions, then everybody in the world expresses in a similar manner. Even a French person, he becomes happy, then he will only smile. He will not cry in that situation. So, emotional expression are uniform in the human species. So, that is the person. So, how well you interpret that to an extent that will determine your empathy in a way. According to some research, think of it. Mehrabian was a person who had done lots of research in this area. According to Mehrabian, when we normally interact with each other in our personal life, then around 93% of our interaction, think of it, 93% of our interaction takes place through the emotional route, including intonation. Emotional route. Only 7% is the role of language. So, only 7% language we speak, 93% emotions we speak and understand. That is what many research has told us. Now, in recent time, you know that whenever we try, earlier remember the study of empathy, etc., was a part of philosophy. But for last few decades, we are trying to study the same thing in a more scientific manner. So, for the last few decades, even empathy has been studied more scientifically. And whenever we try to study something scientifically, then first step of scientific. So, first step of scientific study is, all of you know, is we have talked about that a number of times earlier also. First step of scientific method is the measurement. So, So, some people when they try to study empathy as as I can say scientific topic, they also try to measure the empathy. Let's talk about how do we measure empathy. That will help you to understand also about how do we conceptualize empathy in the modern time. So, let us talk briefly about a method of measurement of empathy. And this method that I am going to talk about, it was developed by a researcher, psychologist called Robert Rosenthal. He developed a method of measurement of empathy called PONS, which means profile of non-verbal sensitivity. Profile of non-verbal sensitivity. Now, let us briefly talk about that method, which will help you to understand how do we understand empathy today. Now, what he did, first of all, he took a young lady around 32 years old, who was very good actor. Now, he asked that lady to express some emotion very openly. Suppose, for example, she was very angry at her son, and she was shouting at the son in that extreme anger. And when she was doing it, a video of whole scene was made. Then after, she was asked to express some other emotion, like for example, she was asked to express happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, surprise. So all these primary emotions, and for all these emotions, a video of 2 minutes was made. Then after, she was asked to express some more complex emotion like motherly love, mother playing with the child, or you can see romantic feeling, Shah Rukh Khan giving that rose to Kajol in that film DDLJ. Romantic seduction, somebody romantically tries to seduce somebody of the opposite sex. So romantic seduction, or more complex emotions like jealousy, envy, hatred, pride, guilt, shame, vengeance, contempt. So she was asked to express many of these emotions. And for all of these emotions, we made a video of 2 minutes each. So we have a large number of such videos. Now suppose I want to check your empathy. Then what I would do, that I will show you one video on this screen, for example here. And in that video, everything is blurred. Only facial expression is visible. And on the basis of that facial expression, you are asked to identify that, tell me what this lady is feeling at this moment. Suppose, for example, on facial expression, you were able to identify emotion better. So your score will be high in that case. This is the height of the score. Your score will be better in that case. A second video is, second you can say an audio is played to you, not a video. In that audio, two people are talking to each other. Your language you don't understand, only intonation of the voice you understand. Suppose, for example, the two people are talking in a foreign language. Two people are talking in the foreign language. That audio clip is presented to you. You don't understand the word because they are speaking foreign language. But even then, listening to that conversation, can you tell us that what they are talking about? Are they happy, sad, complaining, whatever you can see? Well, think of it. Suppose, for example, on this audio clip, your performance was not that good. In a third video clip that was shown to you, only gestures are shown, everything else is blurred. Suppose you were moderate in that. In the fourth one, only postures are visible or identifiable, but everything else is blurred. You were here. In the fifth one, only touches. How does the other person touches somebody? Suppose you are very good in that. Eye contact, maybe you are not that good. So this will be your profile of, say, anger. Your profile of anger. Similarly, you can say we make the curve of every other emotion. We have a large number of such curve, and then finally we superimpose all these curves over each other by using a computer program. Finally, you will get a curve like this one. So we all have our curve, well, like this. So we all have some strong point like this and this. We all have some weak point like this and this. And we may have some average point like this and this. So whenever we interact with each other, then we all have our way of style of interacting. Some people focus more on the facial expression. Some people focus more on the voice. Some people focus more on the body language. Some people focus more on the eyes. Some people focus more on the touch. So different people have different style. This is why our often normal profile comes out to be like this. But there are some people whose profile was found to be something like this. Whose profile was found to be something like this. They were people, suppose this person is A, we will say that this person will be very high in empathy because this person will be able to understand the emotion of others by looking at any of these emotional cues. He will be very high in empathy. On the other hand, there are some people whose profile was found to be something like this. Now they are the people who were, well, quite low in. Suppose this person is B. Now this person will be very low in empathy. He is very inept in understanding the emotion of looking at any of the emotional cues. He would not be able to understand what the other person is feeling. So some people have very high empathy, some people have very low empathy, and most of us have average normal empathy like this. So that is how it is found. The people who are very high in empathy, as we will see throughout the class today, that they have a large number of many advantages in their life. You know, they are the people about whom Freud said. There is a beautiful quotation of Freud. I hope you must have heard the name of Freud, Sigmund Freud. He was one of the most insightful philosopher and psychologist of the late 19th century and early 20th century. So he is also the founder of a very influential school of psychology in the 20th century called psychoanalysis. His understanding of human nature was phenomenal maybe. Now he said, there is a beautiful quotation of Freud. He said that it is impossible for the human beings to lie or to keep things secret. So only thing that we need is that other person is sensitive enough, which I will say empathic enough. Now this is interesting. He said that it is impossible for the human being to lie. As a human being, we cannot lie. We cannot hide also, because he said further in the same line, same paragraph that he wrote, he said, if you lie from your lips, for example, then your eyes will speak the truth, your forehead will speak the truth, your finger will speak the truth, your hand will speak the truth. And if the other person is empathic, which like A, then he will know that no, your eyes are saying something else, your lips are saying something else. There is a discrepancy between your body and your language. They will know that you are lying, and they will force you to speak truth. There are some people in our life also that when we lie to them, then they already know you are lying. Tell me what is the truth. And they force us to speak in such a manner that ultimately we end up telling the truth. He also said that it is impossible for a human being to hide. We cannot hide anything, because if you hide something from your lips, your eyes will reveal the truth. Your forehead will reveal the truth. There are some people like in our life also, that when you can see, for example, when we try to hide something from them, then they know that we are hiding. They will force you know you are hiding something. Tell me what is the truth. What is it that you are hiding? Our parents sometimes, our mother sometimes, some of the friends sometimes. So they know that we are hiding something, and well, they can force us to ultimately reveal whatever we are having. You cannot lie to such people. You cannot hide anything from such people. It is these people about him, perhaps that famous song of Jagdish Singh might have been written in Hindi, Urdu. I hope that many of you must have heard. तुम इतना जो मुस्कुरा रहे हो, क्या गम है जिसको छुपा रहे हो. Now they are the people, they will know that if you are smiling, then they will know that you are smiling. You are smiling, your lips are smiling. There is a smile on your lips, but your eyes are not smiling, your forehead is not smiling. Because when we become happy, then our happiness is not revealed only on our lips. Our whole body becomes happy. And when we become sad, then we don't cry only in our eyes. Our whole body cries. So they will know that there is a smile on your face, but this smile is hiding something. There is something else on your eyes or on your forehead. They will know there is discrepancy between your lips and your body, and they will force you that tell me what is it that you are hiding by smiling. Your smile is hiding something rather than revealing something, hiding something else rather than revealing your happiness. So they will know that your smile is against a facade rather than a revelation of your inner feelings and all. So they are the people, they can understand others very, very well. Empathy is about that. Empathy allows us to go deep into the mind of the other person and know the truth, even if the other person may try to not tell us the truth, lie to us, hide something from us. That is what empathy is. So empathy plays a very important role in our social interaction, as we will see much more in rest of the class also. Let us see if there is a question. Kaushik, sir, whenever we want to express something by using our rational mind, we also need our emotional mind to express it perfectly. Yes, Kaushik, every expression involves both of them. So even if I am speaking word, then there is some emotion is always there into that. Intonation maybe. It is. So perfectly rational speech or is impossible. If you speak perfectly rational, then your speech will become more like a computer's speech, robotic speech. Every word that you speak, it is a combination of rationality as well as emotionality. Rational expression as well as emotional expression. And according to people like Mehrabian, the role of the percentage of emotional expression is much higher than the percentage of the role of the word. 93% is emotional, only 7% is, think of it, only 7% of our expression is rational according to Mehrabian. So every expression has both of them together. So this is what empathy, this is how we measure empathy, this is how we conceptualize empathy. So there are some other aspect of empathy also, but that we will talk about after the break. So after the break, we will talk about some other aspects of empathy further.